Hi, I'm FIDE Master Levi Cherbolenko, and in this series I explore the typical mistakes of people rated anywhere between 1000 and 2000. This is a first reaction, no engine analysis of a chess.com game played between 1901 versus 1936. Let's start. Alright, so c4, the English opening, or the English game. e5, one of the more common move against the English. Knight c3, developing the knight. Knight f6, black does the same. e3. Yeah, so e3 is an interesting move. Typically, the English, they play with a flank-gated bishop. They play like g3, bishop g2, later on maybe they put the knight on f3, castle short, play pawn d3. At some point, black might like play like pawn c6 or something, you know, to block our g2 bishop, or they put the knight on c6 or the pawn on c6 to block our bishop. And then it's very common in the English to play rook b1, b4, b5. Basically, the common idea in the typical English, in the classical English, is to put pressure on the light diagonals, on the light squares, like e4, d5, but especially the long light diagonal, the g2, b7 diagonal. We have our bishop there, and so let's say black will put the knight on c6, will stand in the way of our bishop. So we play rook b1, b4, b5, right? Get rid of the knight moves, and that prolongs the scope of our g2 bishop. Or let's say they play pawn to c6. If black plays pawn to c6, also will be like a barrier against our flank-gated g2 bishop. So when we play b4, b5, to put pressure on that pawn chain to weaken it, right? And again, to enhance the scope of our bishop, you know. And then if we like take on b5, then we no longer will have like that barrier. So that's like the common idea in the English, the most typical idea, right? Pressure on the long g2, b7 diagonal and the light squares in general. But e3 is kind of like a modern idea. Although I would say first, if you want to play e3, don't start with e3. I'd say first play knight f3, put pressure on the e5 pawn, let black play knight c6, and now play e3. And already with e3, we don't attack on the light squares like that, like, you know, like with a flank-gated bishop. So the strategy changes. The strategy here is to attack on the king side. Basically, we're gonna put the queen on c2, which will target h7. And the bishop a lot of times can come to like d3 as well, attacking h7, maybe play like a3 to prevent knight b4, and like the knight can go to like g5 as well and attack h7. So for example, let's say black plays bishop b4, attacking our knight. We could play queen to c2, let's say black castle. Now there is this move knight to d5, attacking this knight and the bishop. But the goal really is to get rid of this knight and then play knight g5 and attack h7. So this knight is black's best defender because it defends the h7 pawn. So we just want to play knight g5 and then take on f6 and then queen h7. So if black plays some move, some neutral move, let's say we play like, I don't know, like d6 or something, yeah, let's say like d6, we could play like knight g5, right? The threat is knight takes f6, queen takes f6, and then queen takes h7. And so if we go like, let's say g6, right, we could, for example, play, let's say like h4, right? G6 is a pawn hook for h4. And then we could like play like h5 eventually, or let's say take on f6, queen f6, move a knight to e4 and then h5, right? But basically the goal is to attack on the king side. So this is the difference between g3 and e3. g3 we attack usually on the queen side, like I showed you with rook b1, b4, b5. e3 is more about king side attack, all right, on h7. We provoke g6 and then we go for h4. But white played e3 immediately. It can transpose, I mean, it can transpose if black plays knight e6 and then knight f3. But I'd recommend playing knight f3 first, because if you play e3, maybe black can play like, I don't know, like c6 or something, you know, and then like d5 and e4, right? Versus if you play knight f3, then they don't have the time to play c6, because then we just take on e5. So that's why. But okay, e3, let's see, d5 black played. Yeah, there is such a move. I don't think it's necessarily the best move. But okay, let's see, d5, cd, knight takes d5, bishop c4, yeah, makes sense. Another move would be knight f3, right? Attacking the pawn. And so if black goes, let's say knight takes c3, bc, and now e4, well, that doesn't work because of queen a4 check, right? Double attack when we take on e4. So black cannot go e4. I think knight f3 might be stronger because I mean, we can always play bishop c4, but we develop a knight, we put pressure on e5, put him a real problem. Now let's say he plays knight c6. Well, we can always play bishop c4, so if we want to like transpose, we could just play bishop c4, but we also have an added option of bishop b5, so we have flexibility. So basically, when you have a choice between, you know, like two moves, which one to make first, generally speaking, we move a kingside knight first before the bishop. We usually move first the knights, then the bishops. That's one. And two, make the move that you have to make anyway, while the second move remains flexible. So we know that the knight we're going to put on f3 anyway. That's clearly the best square. Whereas the bishop, we may put it on c4, we may put it on b5. That's flexible. You can always put it on c4. But what if your opponent makes such a move after which bishop c4 is not the best, but bishop b5 is the best? So then why not play knight f3, which you're gonna play anyway, and then depending on your opponent's next move, you're gonna decide, you know, where to put the bishop. Yeah. So yeah, I think knight f3 probably would have been stronger, but okay, bishop c4 is also fine. All right, knight takes c3. Okay. bc, strengthening the center, right? Now this bishop is very good, putting pressure on f7, already thinking about moving the queen. So like b3 or f3, or even queen h5 is pretty good. Queen h5 is pretty annoying for black, potentially, putting pressure on f7, but also the e5 pawn. Yeah, so looks pretty good for white. I think white already has an advantage. Nothing huge, but a nice position. Bishop d6, good move, developing, preparing the castle, but also protecting the e5 pawn. So now queen h5, you know, the pawn will be defended. So black will just castle. But let's see, d4. Yeah, d4 makes sense. Let's see if anything else. Of course, I mean, white could have tried something like, let's say, queen h5, attacking f7, black castles, and then knight f3, threatening knight g5, attacking f7 and h7, but also the e5 pawn, by the way, right? So black plays like e4, which is going knight g5, game over, threatening here, right? So we cannot play e4. So if we play like h6, well, that's kind of passive. And then maybe white could just take on e5, right? Win the pawn, threaten to take on f7, right? And probably white has an advantage here, just up a pawn. So this would have been pretty interesting. First slide the queen, and then knight f3, and to see how black would defend against this. Because again, white can always play d4. There is no rushing. Like, we can always play d4. Why play it now? Why not try this attacking idea instead? So another rule of thumb is this. If your opponent, as black, does not have a knight on f6, there's this typical idea queen h5. Because again, the knight on h6 has two functions. It defends the h7 pawn, but also the h5 square. So if there is no knight on f6, always consider putting your queen on h5. Okay, that's like a rule of thumb. And the same like for black. You know, if you're like black and your opponent does not have a knight on f3, then consider putting your queen on h4, right, attacking h2. But okay, so white played d4. Again, I think queen h5 would have been much more interesting. But alright, d4 is okay. Castles. Yeah, we put the knight on e2. Do you see the difference between when we put the queen on h5 and with a knight on e2 is like not at all as attacking. It's like not attacking. It's like blocking the queen. The knight is not out there, right? The queen is passive. The knight will go which like g3, but on g5 would have been potentially way more active. So it's not at all attacking, not an attacking stance. So I think white here loses a little bit of his initiative. Still has some advantage due to like his powerful center, but already not such a great attack against the king. And so I think the momentum just wears off slowly but surely. But let's see. Knight e2, b6. b6, huh? I want to put the bishop on b7, yeah? Pressure g2. Interesting. Okay. Alright. Knight g3 makes sense. Alright, bishop b7, attacking g2. Okay. Castles, yeah. Let's just quickly see if there's anything else. Just quickly looking at some tactics, you know, like D. Oh, the first thing you always look at is check for tactics. So, for example, here, castling is the normal move. But you're not going to win the game now because you castle. If you want to win the game, you have to, like now, you have to first look at more crazy stuff. Always begin with the crazy stuff, with the forcing stuff, check, capture, exchange, sacrifice, before you look at a normal move. Because you're never gonna win now because you play castle. But potentially you never know. What if you never know when that moment is? Like it might be right now that you're winning, but you think no, it's like later. Now I'm not winning. I will win later. But how do you know it is not now? It can always be now. You never know. So that's why we always start with looking first at more crazy stuff, more forcing stuff, right? Moves that imply immediate contact between pieces. When you castle, there's no contact, there's no force, there's no forcing your opponent to do anything, so you cannot win. But you want to make a contact move, a tactical move, then you have a potential to win. So for example, what do I mean? Here, first I look at a move like d, bishop takes e5, and then I look at bishop f7 check. Now this might not work per se, but I want to at least check it for a couple of seconds because it has the potential to work. It might ultimately not work, but it has a point. Like it does make some potential, some like a conceptual sense. It has a conceptual sense, and so this is the first step. I want to just be aware of this, and the second step, I want to look at it, and the second step, already I have to calculate if it actually works or not. But conceptually, it does have a point, right? The point being that if rook f7, we just take the queen and win the queen, right? So that's the concept. And if king takes f7, then there is a move like queen h5 check, right? Triple attack against the king, the pawn, and the bishop on e5, right? So that's what I'm saying. And let's see, queen h5. Now if you go, I mean, if g6, we could just like take, obviously. If you go back again, we could just like take the bishop. So it's, and this is pretty interesting. And I mean, if how do you play? I mean, and if bishop like g2, we could play maybe like, and by the way, this is quite weak. Oops, the g7 pawn. We could even like play like just knight h5, for example. Yeah, ignore the rook. Now if we take just queen g7, so you get my point. And if we play like rook f7, we could play, let's say, you know, rook g1, bishop moves, let's say, and then rook g7, and basically checkmate. So you get my point. Already, if it's the best or not, that's the second step. You can go deeper into it, you know, on the second stage, which is you calculate deeper. But it makes some potential sense, conceptual sense, so it makes sense to even look at it, at least check it for a second. So that's my point. So yeah, king f7, I mean, king g8, queen e5, quite interesting. What else? I mean, if you want to defend the bishop, like queen, I mean, king e6, probably would be the move. And then again, we'll not go too deep now, but then basically you'd calculate moves like, I don't know, like, yeah, for bishop c3 is the threat, yeah? Bishop c3 is the threat. Maybe you check like for a second if any check makes sense, like with a queen. I'm not sure, probably not, but you could just like castle. And like the king is weak, and maybe you have some compensation, right? Like f4 next. This h7 pawn is weak, maybe you could just take it. You would push f4, f5, multiple checks with a queen. Maybe play e4, maybe bishop a3, attacking the rook, slide the rook to d1, attack the queen. So definitely have some practical compensation, right? Or like if king of 6, then basically similar stuff, right? But yeah, so that's what I would look at again. You need to spend more time to calculate this. So it depends on the time control. If you don't have enough time control, obviously don't risk it. So it obviously depends. I'm just saying in general, if you have enough time, that's what you want to look at first. Forcing stuff like this, because that's where you can potentially win. But if you don't have enough time, you're not sure, you don't need to necessarily risk it. If it's like not clear, the calculation is like vague, is like unclear, then yeah, you can just make a normal move. But I'm just saying how in general you want to think, look at more crazy tactical stuff first. Okay, so white castle. Oh, and by the way, another move would have been knight f5, actually pretty interesting. The point being, but well, we activate the knight, and if bishop g2, we have queen g4, attacking the bishop, but also threatening queen g7 checkmate. So if we take the rook, it's just queen g7 checkmate. So we'd probably have to play like queen f6. Oh, but then again, we can just take, and if queen f5, queen takes 8. So this b6 move has weakened the lie diagonal. Yeah. Yeah, so knight f5 I like. Knight f5 followed by again by queen g4, pressuring this one. You know, not so clear how to defend it. If g6, that would weaken the dark squares 1, and true that would provoke again further h4, h5, hg, opening up the h-file. So I think I like knight f5, yeah, quite a bit. Yeah, I think knight f5 would have been more aggressive. But okay, white has castled, white has made the normal move. Queen g5, see now already white cannot play knight f5. Oh, queen g5 is still kind of weird. White can play either e4 with tempo, open up the bishop, right? Or like f4 maybe, attack the bishop with tempo, then like f5, f6. So queen g5 I think is not the best move. White played e4, yeah, which of course makes sense. Even f4 would have made some sense. Let's say f4, let's say they take, we take, let's say like black moves the queen, I don't know where. To make it simple, let's say just back, yeah? Let's say back, and now, you know, maybe potentially we could play like f5, f6, maybe even immediately, right? Or like, let's say knight h5 first, for example, and then f5, f6, you know, like queen g4, or we could start with queen g4, and then like knight h5, f5, f6, pressure here. So I think it makes sense to have a pawn on f4, simply because of this f5, f6 idea, destroying black's pawn structure on the king side. But of course, it's also more risky, because you know, you move a pawn from your king, you open up this dark diagonal, the e-file potentially weak, the e3 square potentially weak, so there is some risk to it. Whereas if you play e4, you don't move any king from your pawn, so it is safer. Okay, so it's also okay, yes, yeah, should be fine. Definitely advantage for white. Queen g6, g6, rook e1, I guess it's okay, it just looks kind of passive. Again, you first want to look at more crazy stuff. Don't begin with a move like rook e1. That's like the last move I think about. It might ultimately be like the best move, but that's not the thinking process. First, you want to look at more crazy stuff, because if you're gonna win, it's because of that more tactical stuff, not because of a move like rook e1. If that crazy stuff or tactical stuff does not work, then look at a normal move, okay? Keep it last. So the first move that I'd look at probably would be like h4, with idea of h5. So if black takes, I just play h5. The queen has to move somewhere, and I just take queen e4, game over. And even if you don't take, again, I just want to play h5, attack the, harass the queen. h5, and then where would the queen go, you know? And then maybe like I could also play like h6, right? Further like destroy black's pawn structure, provoke g6, which in turn would weaken the dark squares, you know, around the king. So this is way more interesting. Do you see? This is still a defense of a e4 pawn, except it's not a direct defense. Do you see? When you play rook e1, you directly defend. Oh, they attack my pawn, let me directly defend. You're not gonna win because they move like this. You wanna defend indirectly. Try whenever you can to defend against threats not directly, because it's too passive. You wanna defend in a tactical way. I defend but indirectly, in a tactical way. So I defend, but at the same time I attack. The best moves are the moves that combine defense with offense, right? When you play rook e1, there's defense. When I play h4, I at the same time defend against bishop e4, but I also attack. So try to make moves that combine defense with offense, alright? So I'm not saying h4 is like the only move or the best move. It might not be, but that's just one move. That's just one idea. Might be other ideas too, I don't know. I'd also look at a move like d, because again, why? Because it's forcing. Bishop takes e5, and then I'd look at a move like f4. Why? Because it's forcing. I would see, of course, that they can take the pawn on c3, but that already would be the second stage to see if it's already good for us or not, to lose the pawn or not. That's the second stage. But I have to at least check it, although I see that I lose the pawn. Why? Because it's dynamic, because it's tactical, because I have a potential conceptually to get some compensation in terms of like attack and initiative, right? And already the second stage is to, you know, calculate deeper and to see if that actually is the case, you know. So bishop c3, and then it calculate like, let's say f5, right? Attacking the queen, and then the queen would move somewhere, let's say like queen d6 or something. And maybe I don't want to trade it, and I have to like calculate, and can I go like, I don't know, like bishop, like queen g4, and then they take on a1, but then maybe I have like some attack like knight h5 or f6 or whatnot. I don't know. I'd have to calculate, right? Maybe it's all bad and doesn't work, but I would look at that. I'd calculate for a couple of minutes, and then if it doesn't work, I wouldn't play it. But these are the moves that I'd start analyzing first. If they do not work, then I'd play rook e1. But that again depends on your time. Big caveat here, right? That I mean in general. So I'm showing you like in general how you wanna play in chess. Obviously, if you have like don't have a lot of time to like calculate all this stuff, then you can just make a move that you like, feel comfortable with, maybe not too risky. Then rook e1 is okay. All right. So I'm just saying in general. If you have a time, look at stuff like that first. If you do not have a time to calculate, you're not sure, then you can make the safe move. So in that case, it is absolutely fine. All right. A lot of time, you can go more crazy, spend more time on calculation. A little time, you can, play safer. All right. So that's all right. That's okay. Let's see. Rook e1, knight d7. Okay. Bishop d3. Okay, bishop d3 is pretty interesting. Like in case black, ever goes ed, we'll have like e5, attack the queen. Yeah, I don't know if it's like the best or not. It's probably okay. Another move would have been, again, there's of course h4, h5 idea. We already know, but knight f5, I don't know if it works here, but knight f5 potentially interesting, right? Except we would need to see if black doesn't have like bishop e4. Maybe it's okay, rook e4, queen f5, winning a pawn, but we have a bishop, maybe some compensation potentially, maybe like bishop d5 or like bishop d3, and the light squares are quite weak for black, so maybe like compensation, I don't know. But or the queen f3 also makes sense, right? Defending the pawn, and now already knight f3 is definitely an option, right? So queen f3 also would have made sense. And there's also this idea of a4 because b6 is a pawn hook. So maybe you want to play a5 and maybe like a6, gaining space, attacking this bishop. Then if you go bishop c6, we just go d5, right? And so we have to leave a diagonal, which makes it weak, the light diagonal, So I think, yeah, a4 also would have made sense. Like ideally, when we have this kind of structure, we want to get rid of this pawn. We want to play like f4, if we can. Get rid of this pawn. Let's say we take, and then we'll just like take, and then we go for like e5 if we can. If like rook was on on f1, so we play like f4, ef, bishop f4, takes rook f4, and then like e5. So basically, if we can get rid of the e5 pawn and then push e5, this would be a huge advantage for white. So the question is, how can we do that? Or like I said earlier, another option is to take on e5, simply take it. They take and then push f4. So that's another way, right? Take, and then play f4 and then like f5 or e5. Yeah. But okay, let's see. So bishop d3, rook h3, e8 makes sense. Putting pressure here. Knight f5, yeah. Okay, makes sense, I think. Let's see. Knight f6, all right. Queen f3, like I said earlier, all right. Rook e6, probably want to double up, right, and put pressure. Yeah, they might force white. Maybe to play d5 soon. Otherwise, might be a bit too risky for white, might lose this pawn. So, so white did play d5, all right. Rook back to e8, okay. Bishop b2, now that's weird. Why would you play bishop b2? It's just stuck. And even if we play c4, the pawn is well defended. The bishop is absolutely stupid on b2. The pawn is defended. It's actually better on c1, probably. But if you want to put it somewhere, well, one diagonal could be like, you could just play like bishop e3, for example. That's a much better diagonal. It's a central diagonal. Whenever you can, put your bishop on a central square because it controls two diagonals simultaneously, And then it can help like potentially like c4, c5. By the way, we could put like rook on c1 and play like c4, c5. But it attacks both diagonals at the same time. So it's very useful. So if you want to move a bishop, move it like that, here or even here, right? If you don't want to like block your rook, for example, right? Still fine. You can go again for a4, especially if the rook left this, file. We could play a4, a5, ab, and like rook a7, pressure on the a file, we could we could like take maybe even now or later, or like now, and now this pawn is like weak, but also this pawn is weaker. So now we could play a4. So now a5 becomes even stronger because the b7, b6 pawn does not have a support over c7 pawn. So it will become even weaker. We could play a5, followed by like bishop e3, rook e2, b1, and really put pressure on these two files, right? Because we don't have a support over a7, over c7 pawn. Or we could also play a4 and then play bishop a3 and put pressure on the d6 pawn. Because now the d6 pawn is also weak, you know. Also, like the light squares are quite weak. If you look at it, you know, we could also play like bishop b5 stuff. I guess it's like good maybe not to allow like knight d7, knight c5, because c5 is quite a weak square for us. But we could easily do it by playing like bishop b5 before knight d7 or after. Just pin it through the rook, right? Just make sure don't allow knight c5, you know, with like bishop b5. But even if we did allow, still I think would be, we could just play like bishop c2. Let's say knight c5, just bishop c2. And then again, just put your bishop like, let's say on e3, rook e2, b1, a4, a5. And the knight on c5 still does not defend with b6 pawn. Still would be advantage for white. But yeah, so something like this. But definitely not bishop b2. This is a mistake. Let's see. Knight d7, see, like I said, we want to put the knight on c5. Okay, bishop b5 pinning the knight, makes sense. Let's see, rook to d8, makes sense, alright. c4, yeah, very weird, bad move. Now after knight c5, his bishop will not move, but can play knight c5, a6. It's just so weird. Should block your bishop, you know, box your bishop in like that and then play like c4, what's the point? You're actually, although it looks more active, but it's stuck, it's actually blocked. After knight c5, it attacks no one. You're actually better off with a bishop on c2. Although it looks less active, but actually it cannot be attacked, it defends a pawn, you know, potentially if, you know, this pawn goes away, it will attack the diagonal, it controls like the d3 square, so you're actually better off with a bishop on c2 than like this, after like knight c5, a6, okay? So c4 definitely a mistake, should have played something else. But let's see, here, alright, knight c5, wait, a little tactic, huh? Interesting, okay. So the idea is that if bishop e5 and knight e7, double attack check and take the queen. Yeah, that's pretty neat. That's pretty neat. Okay, h4, alright. Yeah, bishop e5 was quite nice. Yeah, that was probably white's best move so far. Yeah, white's best move. Okay. Bishop g7. Bishop g7, I guess, is okay. I mean, another move would be like, because we could first of all, I look at the tactic first. I look at the move like knight h6 check. Why? Because it's like a more crazy stuff. Actually, wait, no, it doesn't work because queen takes. Yeah, see, I missed that from I was thinking gh and then like queen g4 checkmate. Yeah, cannot go away because of bishop. But wait, I missed queen h6. Yeah, queen h6. Otherwise, it would have been quite quite nice. Okay, not knight h6. Okay, maybe like just queen g3 or queen g4. You know, attacking. G7 would be another option, I guess. Although maybe black could just take. Queen takes. Of course, this is still great for white. f6. f6 we could play like queen. I don't know, let's say queen c7. Again attacking. Cannot play rook d7, we just take. Cannot play rook f7, we just take this rook. Yeah, this actually looks completely winning. And cannot go queen h6, we just take the queen. Yeah, we cannot defend against queen g7. So queen g3. Yeah, queen g3 looks actually quite good. So if we take, this is completely winning. We have to play g. But if g6. Yeah, g6. I mean, at the very least, we could just like. Oh, by the way, we could just actually attack the queen. So we just attack the queen to make it leave this diagonal. Let's say we like take or something, and now knight h6 checkmate. Knight h6 checkmate. Oh, and by the way, we could even like maybe play like rook d1 now. You know, let's say we take, and then again apply that idea, right? That all the idea of ours. Right. even if takes, it's like checkmate. Anyway, yeah, so something like this. But yeah, bishop g7, white played, still should be, of course, absolutely winning. Bishop c8. Bishop c3. Queen f4. Knight e7. Yeah, knight e7 is good, of course, but white could have just played queen takes f4. Actually, would have been even better. Bishop f4, knight e7, checkmate. But bishop has no moves, you know. Would have been checkmate. But okay, knight e7, bishop e7, queen f4, white is up a queen, knight d3, queen g3, attacking the king and the knight. Oh. Yeah, I mean, what else? Yeah, it's just checkmate. Alright, I hope you enjoyed the analysis. If so, subscribe, like, comment below, and I'll see you in the next video.